Okay, hello everybody, and thank you for tuning into part 3 of the Black Box podcast on the disappearance of Joan Risch. And this is an older case from 1961, and today we're going to be exploring sort of a different angle. This is going to be more about, was this a stage setup? Did this woman just sort of create a scene and try to fool people into thinking there was a real assault and then just disappear on her own free will? In part 1 we talked about this a little. However, we have to remember that this originally came from a journalist who was writing for the local paper in Lincoln, Massachusetts. And one of the things that triggered this was she went to the library and she looked at 2 books on disappearances and found that Joan Risch had checked out both of them. Serene Gerson was the reporter for the Fence Viewer, and that's the local newspaper. And when she found out that most of the books, many of the books rather, were really related to missing persons cases, that has launched this enormous discussion on, did this woman fake her own disappearance? Did she injure herself in some way? She lost about 1 pint of blood. That's an approximation. About 1 cup to 1 pint of blood in the house, and which doctors described as a non-fatal injury, which could have possibly come from a miscarriage, or it could have come from some sort of self-inflicted wound that was non-fatal, and it's really going to be something that we can explore at a later date. And we find blood in all parts of the downstairs. There is a lot of confusing blood evidence that the investigators can't really explain. And, one of the most interesting things was that there were large smears of blood on the kitchen floor and activity elsewhere in the house, but no footprints. Now, no footprints. Is it possible that the person was just really lucky and they didn't step in their own blood, or was this the work of someone intentionally smearing blood in certain places? For example, someone has wounded themselves and then they're just putting blood in different parts of the house to try and make it look like there's been a horrific crime going on, but in reality it was actually a very small wound. And there was a trail of blood that led out of the kitchen into the driveway. It ended at Joan's car, which was stained in 3 places: the right rear fender, the left side of the hood near the windshield, and the very center of the trunk. Investigators found this last one particularly hard to interpret. Like when I first read this, my interpretation was that it actually was the miscarriage or abortion theory, that she went out to her car. She's thinking, I better just try and drive and get somewhere. Then she's like thinking twice. No, wait. I'm not in any state of mind to drive. I can't do this. I can't even dial the phone. I'm too out of it. And that's when she leaves on foot. If this were a staged disappearance, I keep saying staged disappearance. If she had staged the scene to make it look like it had been, a set of foul play, she did disappear. That's not fake. This is a real disappearance. Let's clarify that. If she had staged the scene herself, putting blood in various parts of the house would make a lot of sense. And especially a blood spatter in the center of the trunk, on the hood of the car, and on the fender. I mean, in places all around. And not to mention that there were drops of blood near a window in the child's bedroom, 2 more similar found along the stairs, along with 8 in the master bedroom. So, already, blood is everywhere, but really not that much. And Joan did read the book Into Thin Air about somebody staging their own disappearance and about someone smearing blood in different places. And did Joan ever expect that anyone would find out that she read that book? Is this something that is credible? Like, is this an actual theory that we need to investigate? Did do you think that there's any chance that this woman staged her own kind of like, blood spatter to make people think that some sort of foul play had happened? And one of the biggest motivations for this was, some people believe she was just very frustrated with her life as a housewife, which her husband disputes, saying no, she was happy, that she didn't enjoy being a mother anymore. Other people dispute that too, but we don't always know a person's true feeling. Or was she just so enamored with the concept of true crime and mysteries and these disappearances that she had read so many books about, she just had to make it come true? She just did something wild. She had to just sort of break free from the shackles of ordinary life and just do something legendary. Well, that is one viewpoint. The other viewpoint is, she read mystery novels. She read true crime stuff. Is every fan of Sherlock Holmes, going to be guilty? Or it's like, if somebody's murdered and they find a bunch of James Patterson books on the bookshelf, like, no, it's their fault. They did this to themselves. They liked mystery novels. They wanted to be the center of the victim story. And when you say it like that, it's just like, if you're listening to this podcast, you probably spend quite a lot of time with mysteries and true crime and just trying to learn more about, humanity the way Joan Risch did. And is every fan of mysteries or true crime necessarily going to try and want to do something like this? I mean, if I suddenly disappeared, people would look through my computer history and my phone history and, well, he read up on the disappearance of Joan Risch a lot. He probably did it to himself. I mean, what really do they have to go at? Think about how many people you know in your life that read mysteries. On the other hand, think about how many people you know that like mysteries that have disappeared in a very gory crime scene with very oddly placed blood spatter evidence. For example, if the doctor had determined that this had been a sort of lethal amount of blood that had been lost, I think this case would be a slam dunk. We would just sort of say that she was injured somehow and she left to some, either in disorientation or trying to get help, and somehow she ended up not making it where she was trying to go, and then she just passed away outside of the house. But we can't really say any of that. I mean, all we have is saying that a doctor said that she did not lose a lethal amount of blood within the house, and the blood trail does not continue after the driveway. Once again, that could be something like, did Joan inflict a non-fatal wound to herself, and then, begin to start smearing this blood evidence around the house, and then maybe it really wasn't so bad, maybe she really had to, force some of the blood out at the end, and maybe that's why, that the blood did not sort of ooze out into the driveway. That's just, this really was not a very big wound, and we have Joan, being the one falsifying the sort of crime scene, if you will. It's very difficult to know, because when on researching this one, my first instinct about the disappearance of Joan Risch was almost instantly. Like, we're talking when I read the Wikipedia page for the first time, a long, long time ago, and I was just like, this is fake. She did it to herself. After a lot more investigation, I really began to change, and I really began to see some other things. But I think it's a very odd similarity that her disappearance is so similar to some of the things that she read in the books. We're not only talking about a disappearance, we're talking about staging the scene. All the blood that was left behind, all the blood evidence, and how that's very similar to the book Into Thin Air, where someone smears blood to leave a crime scene. Keep in mind, I will admit, I have not read that book Into Thin Air that Joan Risch did, and if anybody else has, and anybody else has something to offer, please feel free to share, because sometimes these accounts, some people say that this book says this, this, and this, but really it says something completely different. Now, the other thing I was talking about when it comes to investigations, we also have to keep in mind that this came from the journalist Serene Gerson. And she became a very strong proponent of this theory that Joan staged the whole scene. Now, how do you feel that this reporter picked up one book that Joan Risch had checked out, the next book she picks up Joan Risch had also checked out, and that this reporter just really, really wanted to write that story, that this woman may have created her own disappearance, and she might have faked all the blood evidence, and she probably thought that that was just such a more entertaining story that she went with it. Keep in mind, when she does that, she has already sort of determined her conclusion before she has evaluated all the evidence. Reading mystery novels and reading true crime novels doesn't mean it doesn't mean you're going to try and fake your own disappearance, or it doesn't mean you're going to stage a crime scene, or it doesn't mean you're going to do any illegal activity. She could have just been someone who liked mysteries, and something very unfortunate happened to her. But keep in mind, it's just like, how much do you want to bet that this reporter really, really wanted to put that story out there? And, this is evidence. We can't dismiss this 100%. There is a certain degree of evidence with this, but I almost feel that Serene Gerson really wanted to promote this idea because it was a much hotter story for the local paper than a typical disappearance. And Joan did leave in a very, very bloody way. There was a very bloody and gory crime scene left behind. That alone is an enormous story, but this takes a drastic twist and turn. What do you guys think? Do you think there's any truth to the theory that Joan Risch could have faked all this, and this is a stage setup, and that Joan just injured herself? We're talking one person in the house. She smears the blood evidence herself in the kid's bedroom, in the kitchen, in the master bedroom, one drop on the basement to the stairs, by her car, and then disappears, never to be seen again. Just like a story from a book.